go, go. She always be talking like she no. I told her don't ever leave me long. I guess I'm accident prone. Go. She always be talking like she no. I told her don't ever leave me long. I guess I'm accident prone.
What up? Welcome to the first episode of a new program that I call Pro Chat. Pro Chat is a short version of Producer Chat. It is a focused conversation for producers, songwriters, and artists are more than welcome to join, but this is definitely focused for the producers in the world. Welcome. I am your pilot today, Mr. Pope. Joining me today is two-time Grammy-nominated producer, artist, songwriter, formerly longtime Native Instruments executive, Carmen Rizzo. Carmen, welcome to Pro Chat.
It's good to see you, and thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you looking well in these COVID times. You're looking fresh and healthy. I like that.
A lot of tennis, a lot of sunshine.
Yeah. We give a couple of shout outs to the crew. I got some of the homies pulling up on us. So we got my man Top Shotter in the building with us. We got March 85. We got Cage. We got Ponzo. We got Jimmy, my man Jimmy Age. What up, Jimmy? It's a lot of my team in here. They're loyal family, Alex Ultra. So today's topic, every Pro Chat will have a specific topic. So today we're going to talk about the focus of the conversation. I'm so fortunate to have Carmen here with us on day one. We're going to talk about session energy, the energy that you bring into the room of a recording session and how energy can affect the finished product. Carmen, you've played many roles in the studio. You've played songwriter, you've played artist, you've played producer. What, in your opinion, how important is navigating especially let's talk first and foremost before we get into say one-on-one session, let's say a collaboration session where there's more than two people in the room, right? There's multiple people collaborating. How important in your experiences is the energy and the attitude that you bring into the room?
Well, I think the first thing people have to just kind of remind themselves is that you have to feel comfortable. It's not a meeting, it's a creative environment. So if you want to get creative, you have to feel comfortable. So if you come in with a bad attitude or something's not going your way and that carries on into the session, you're going to make that other person feel uncomfortable. Yeah. And then do you want to get creative? I mean, that sounds pretty simple advice, but you have to remind yourself, when you go into an environment, and today it's not a conventional studio as we know it. It's simple advice like COVID times or side of the times of where we're at now. Yeah. It's about like a video chat. It could be a small room.
Session. Yeah, right.
And you have to know that when I come in these four walls or the screen, you push everything aside.
Yeah. Sessions to me are an intimate thing. I feel like when I'm working with someone for the first time or different people for the first time, it's kind of like speed dating, right? You're supposed to all of a sudden just jump in a room with them and click and make great records. So I tend to start off sessions, especially with new people. I kind of just start off with a conversation. You know what I mean? I want to break the ice. I want to get people's vibe and then get their, energy. So I tend to start, I don't necessarily jump right into the music. Sometimes as you're starting conversations about life and, maybe what's going on in people's lives and see what's going on. How do you approach working with new people?
Well, the first thing I do is I've got to make sure I'm the right person for them, because everybody wants work, everybody needs work, everybody wants to be on the session. But I'll be the first one to tell you, man, I might be the wrong person for the session. And if I put myself in a situation where I don't fit in or it's out of my skill set, it does nobody any good. So I often, when I meet with new artists, sort of find out what they want to do and try to delicately find out what their strong parts are and their weak parts, so I can then shine and think, oh, wow, I feel I can do this really well for you. Because I think too many people jump in a room to be there and then they find themselves lost.
That's a really good point. And I don't think enough. I think it comes with a certain amount of experience, right? Where you can assess a situation and know that maybe I'm not the right person for this job. Because I think when you're first starting out, you're trying to take on anything. You're trying to do it all, right? You're trying to be, Mr. or Mrs. everything. I think that's a really good point you brought up, because I think one of the things about being a really good producer is putting together the right combination to get the job done. The right combination of elements.
Because I think that two things get in the way. One, you want that gig, so you're going to do whatever or say whatever. And the other thing is money. And I'll be the first one to say, just like I mentioned, maybe I'm the wrong person or maybe I'm the absolute best person. And the second thing is with money. When someone says, well, how much do you charge? Or what's the day rate? Or what do you think? I said, I don't want to talk about that, because right now that's not my concern. If you're paying me $1 or $1 million, I know that sounds kind of petty, but I have to make sure that I'm doing a great job. Because when that song is done or that record is done, no one's going to ask you how much that you got paid. They're going to say, you did that record? And that's all you should care about. But so often money gets in the way, where I can tell you some of the best stuff that I've done in my career was probably the lowest paid.
Really?
And that's something that people don't remember. I've got countless, you can't see them, gold and platinum records. I don't know how much I got paid. I don't remember, and nor do I care. And nor does anyone else.
They were probably the biggest record you did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think these are simple things that you have to remind yourself. When I've done master classes and stuff before, something that I always try to mention is, social skills, because not everybody is, feels kind of comfortable around other people, or they're shy, but social skills do kick in. You want to make sure other people feel at ease. You have to have good style. I mean, this sounds really stupid, but you should dress nice. I don't mean you have to be dressed up, but look nice, smell nice. I've had people come in a room and just take over a room in a real bad way. And then I think to myself, I don't really care what they're bringing to the table. I don't want to be around you. But then it could be the polar opposite. Somebody who just has swag, has style, and is talented. And I'm like, I want to be around that person.
Yeah, we got a question. How do you feel about having people in the room, especially and I think what I think he's getting at, how do you feel about having people in the room who don't need to be in the room?
That's a good point. And I think that's something that's really a complete sign of the times, because there's a difference between producer and a collaborator, right? So if you're in a room with 12 people and everybody's a songwriter, then I don't know what everyone's role is, versus if you're the producer and you're the ringmaster and you're the circus leader or something. I would have to really judge the room and think to myself, if we're doing vocals or we're creating something intimately, then maybe there doesn't need to be a crew in the room, versus, nowadays on songs, there's 18 writers. One guy did the tambourine, one girl did the hi-hat. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's how they write songs. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think you do have to be sensitive to who's in the room.
Yeah. I personally don't like extra people in the room, but depending on who you're working with, right? Like certain artists, that's how they roll, right? They have people that they're comfortable having around them.
Yeah.
It's almost like a security blanket for them. So in some cases, you really have to tolerate that, and you have to navigate that, because that was a good point you brought up, Ponzo, because in popular music today, artists tend to roll with like some people that make them comfortable in the studio. That's one of the ways they actually diffuse, especially if they're working with a new producer that they're getting familiar with. They tend to make sure they have their security blanket in there or their buffer. Um, and that also could be somebody who really shouldn't be in the room or really doesn't have anything beyond sort of you know, maybe not the qualified person to be critiquing the song, in creation,
Because also, I think a really good topic is what is the producer? Because, depending on the genre of music you're doing, a producer might fill a different role. Like there are songwriter producers, there are musician producers, there are engineer producers. You could go down that list. Or there's maybe a Rick Rubin style, more of an executive. Yeah, which there's nothing wrong with any of the categories. Yeah. But I think you have to adjust according to what you do. And then speed, comes in. Like if you talk to Louis Bell or something who's very fast, he'll be the first one to tell you, if I'm working, with an artist and they hear something, I got to do it now and quick. I can't say, go down the street and get a coffee and wait 5 hours and come back. You're going to ruin the vibe. So I think to have agility and to be quick and fast is really important.
Yeah, which goes right into our next question. So how have you dealt with the backseat producers? Because there's always some of those guys.
There's always those people. I mean, I guess my only answer to that would be you'd have to listen, because I'll be the first to say somebody brings up some ideas that I maybe never thought of. And I don't care if it's the receptionist or part of the entourage, it might be a good idea. I think, and you could also vouch for this shit, sometimes it's, okay, this happens a lot. And this answers, I think, the question. A lot of people bring in, yes men around them, and they're high-fiving them in a session, like, check out the track. And everybody's like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't need to hear that. I want you to say it's not right, or I love this, but I don't like that. I don't have to agree with them, but I'd like to listen to them. So I guess to answer your question about the backseat producer, let's see. I don't mind it so much.
Yeah, I think when we're in creation mode, I'm the same way. If I, as much as possible, I try to get out of the room who shouldn't be there. I like the people who've got the right energy for the room. So meaning someone could be in the room and I'm okay with them staying in the room if they got the right energy. So if they even if they're like, say, a quote unquote a backseat producer, I'm okay with the suggestions too, because once again, sometimes it's an untrained ear that might have a suggestion that I wouldn't have thought of.
Exactly.
So I'm definitely okay with like people like, but as long as they're respectful too. I also like people to be respectful in terms of how they.
And I think that's a really key part of it, because when you're creating something, I don't care if you're making a meal or you're making a record, you have to show some common, respect. You are creating something for someone else, so you have to be kind.
Yeah, I think it's, I think that's just one of the things of going back to the energy in the room. I think when you have people that bring good energy into the room, for instance, as an artist I work with, Moxie, and she has a creative, it's really her creative director, a woman that works with her, who contributes greatly to the writing process too, because she just brings really good energy and really good ideas. Even though she's not a musician or a songwriter, she brings really good energy and really good conversation that really sparks ideas. So, and she's she has, without ever having too much studio experience, she has great studio etiquette. So I think that's what we're talking about here, is a lot of studio etiquette.
And actually, that's a really good point, is the studio etiquette. If you're working with somebody and, I don't know, their etiquette is they're on their phone, they're loud, they're bringing in food that stinks up the room or something.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of etiquette. And I think that we all have to be sensitive to that.
Yeah. And, I work with a lot of young artists, and the studio etiquette is out the window. They didn't go through. No, it's just a whole nother level of like whatever. And and great. I mean, they've curated their environment to how they want it. So I just call it more their. But I came up through Dre and through certain people, so who expected a certain studio etiquette, right? And don't get me wrong, Dre likes the energy of people. Dre comes from, he used to have 20 people in the room. He comes from that. Like that was Dre's process. There was a time when he wanted 20 people, when he wanted feedback, not when he was necessarily creating, but he liked that energy of it. So I think there's a time and a place for that.
Sure.
We have another question. This is a good one. What do you consider the producer? I'll let you go first. I think we.
Yeah, that's a really great question because I often compare it when people who might not know the music business, I'll often compare it to a movie director where, you're dictating people's roles in the process of making a film, whether it's the lighting director or the actor or the DP or the music, etc. And I think with a record producer, it's similar, and I think this is where I could talk about this for hours and I could differ and argue with people, but I don't take away from any of this, but I think that the title is subject for discussion because as an example, if you look at like a Rick Rubin maybe or Trevor Horn or, go down the list of classic producers,
and more in a traditional sense.
More of in a traditional sense where you're in a proper studio, you're with a group of other, musicians where you're dictating or assisting them of what you want or what the artists want, and you are the voice of the artist.
Yep.
That's kind of more of a producer. But then in a lot of current music, it's hard to identify when there's multiple producers on a record and you don't really know what they're doing because often they're doing it separately. And I think it's a very trick question. I don't think anyone's going to give you the same answer, and there isn't really one answer. And I definitely think, just one last thing, it really is dependent on the kind of music you're making. If you're working with a band or hiring musicians versus you're in a room with a computer, which is also a skill set.
Yeah. I think the modern sense of producer, right, has definitely blurred the lines of what a producer and a songwriter is. There are many times, and obviously running good music, we ran into this a lot, right? Because Kanye likes to use different teams of people to work on the same song, right? So I was able to, one of the things I was really good at is really able to speak to people and define what they did. Because in many times you had people that were actually musicians on a record, right? A record was already written and they contributed music to it, right? So they're actually just contributing additional music. Then there are people that actually did production on a record, which would, I would term under, either co-producer or additional production, sure, depending on what you did. So it was funny. It's a very gray area, right? Meaning sometimes what would lean over into production versus what leaned over into, just adding music and or what was publishing, maybe what was publishing and what was writing, but wasn't production. You know what I mean? So it was really tricky at times,
because also I think some producers work very fast and they get things done, and there's something to be said about that. I mean, I'm showing my age, but I come from an era where, maybe I wasn't producing, but I was, let's say, mixing, and I was engineering, and you're working with other, producers. Like I remember doing a Ray Charles record at the end of his life with Richard Perry, and I'm mixing, and it was taking forever to piece a record together, and that's what a producer does. But then someone like a Trevor Horn, who I was schooled by, I learned all of the production is in the recording. So when we came time to mix, it was cake. It was easy. Anybody could throw those faders up because the mixing was done
while he was recording
all of the production. Where nowadays it depends. Like you have some hotshot Pro Tool kid, or I don't know, needle and threading it together, which is also a skill set. Don't get me wrong, which is another type of a producer.
Yeah. Well, sometimes that's bad to me though, because there's a lot of artists that get what I call demoitis. So they actually, because someone's been doing some mixing along the way, they get married to that, and it's not a full mix. So then when the record gets fully mixed, they get demo-itis and they want it to sound more like the demo, which wasn't actually a full mix. But you know, it's just part for the.
But also, Shay, you know, here's another good point. Back to the Trevor Horn thing. When we were making the Big Seal record, the Seal 2 with Kiss 'Em a Rose, in the process of making that record over years in different countries and different musicians, different tempos, different takes, go down the list. In the end, his job as a producer was to come to me or us and saying, I want the synth bass in the verse, but the real bass in the chorus. But then in the B section, I want these bars, okay, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And when I listened back to those records, and I remember in the mix stage how easy it was because all of the work was done in the production, which is called a producer. It's no different than a movie director saying, I want the lighting to be dark, and they're telling the lighting person to do this, and then on the editing, that's their job.
Yeah. Yep. We have some questions I want to make sure we get to because I missed some. How do you feel about artists recording a record without the producer being present in the studio? Like, because of the way music's being done now. How do you feel about that?
I think if I can start, I think that's the standard, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think the term of making a record doesn't mean anything anymore because there is no such thing as a demo. So everything is a master these days. So if the artist is in their bedroom making a great track, it's a master. And then at that point, sure, they're working on their own. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Do you feel like you don't? I personally like to be present when people cut vocals because I obviously want to put input into that. Do you feel like you miss out on that though if you're not present?
Well, I think it goes back to, is it a record or is it a demo? I mean, if somebody sends me a track of like, here's my song, I might say that vocal is perfect. I wouldn't touch it. I don't really care if I'm not there. But then in the same breath, sure, like yourself, it's nice to sort of coach someone to, through their vocals. But then that's a whole other conversation where nowadays there's vocal producers who are the
really good at what they do. Yep.
Rihanna, there's people like, I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say you're perfect. Like Rihanna only records with her vocal, with her vocal producer and engineer. Same with Beyonce. She only records with Stewart. So
right, but then there's artists like Prince who would only do vocals by himself. So there might with no one in the room.
Yeah.
So I think
Moxie's like that. She cuts her own vocals, which same thing. Like with her, she's great at cutting her own vocals, but I'd love to produce them sometimes because she's very comfortable. Because she knows how to cut her own vocal and get her vocal sound that she likes. But there are many times that, she needs to be produced because then we end up having to do it in the editing, right? We have to go back which is a real bummer. And I think, again, to answer that question, whoever wrote it, is that, you really should feel out the artist because I think there's a combination of both where they might want someone's voice or, someone to be coaching them. And not everybody's great at that. Or there could be somebody that just wants to sing it by themselves because they feel more comfortable. Yeah. Good answer. Good answers. Let's see. We got another one. Somebody said, I feel the ability to adapt is very important. If you're in a room with Dre, you need to know it's different than being in a room with Hitmaker. Okay, cool. That's just a comment. You're right. That's true. They asked who's on your playlist right now? Who are you listening to right now?
Oh. Probably some artists that you wouldn't know. And I don't mean that.
Okay, that's part of what we're here for, to like make people aware of some stuff.
Yeah, I really enjoy a lot of world music and a lot of ethnic kind of global music. So there's a French artist called Riff Cohen.
How do you spell it?
Ricohn, Cohen. She has a record out.
How do you say it one more time? I'm sorry.
It's first name is Riff, Riff. Last name is Cohen, Cohn, I think.
Cohen?
En, yeah. And I'd have to look on my playlist. I have to, I'm guilty probably like a lot of people where you're listening on Spotify or wherever of new music, and then I often have to remind myself, who is that artist? So
Yeah. Of questions. Are you finding new artists that you're digging these days?
yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer of, you know, every new artist is as good as any artist that's currently successful. I mean, I I don't need to selfishly work on like huge artists to be satisfied. I
Yeah.
can be completely satisfied working with. I mean, like I just produced a world music artist from Tunisia, Miriam Ben Amour, who found me. I didn't know who she was. She wasn't signed.
Yeah, Miriam. I know
Yeah,
Miriam.
yeah,
Yeah, she's great. I love Miriam.
yeah. And I'm like, I don't care. You're fucking amazing. I don't
Yeah,
care.
you're talking about Miriam that's managed by Jason Bernard, right?
No, a different one.
Oh, okay, okay.
Different woman. But the point is, to answer the question, I'm always looking for new artists because to me, I want to feel inspired, and I want to react like I'm fearless because you also know from working with big artists, if somebody big calls you, you're on you got to be on point, like your A game, and you should always have your A game. But there's something about being so excited to work with somebody new, and you have that fearless approach to what you're doing. And sometimes when you're working with big artists, you might be intimidated.
Well, I actually like working with younger and emerging artists more than I like working with big artists. Obviously, big artists always move the needle and always like your publishers makes your publishers and your lawyers happy. But I always like it's kind of like I guess it's like the idea of penny stocks, right? You know what I mean? It's like finding this gem of a stock and then investing in it, time and energy into it, or a seed. A better analogy is actually a seed because I really don't care about the monetary side of it. It's about seeing this seed grow, and I love being a part of the watering process. So it's like the seed gets planted, and then I'm helping I'm one of the rainstorms that come water it.
Yeah, and I think something to be said is that everyone who's a record producer wants to be hired for what they do, right? Like whatever you feel this person does this great, so I want to hire you for that. Nobody wants to be a Swiss Army knife,
Yeah.
where okay, we can all do kind of everything in some fashion, but there's something to be said that this person, whether they're successful or not successful yet, is hiring me because they like what I do, and that's such a great feeling.
Yeah. Question. Do you think interning is a great way for someone to get closer and gain knowledge from an artist or producer?
Absolutely, I support that 1,000%. I've had two studios in my life that I've owned, and I've had fantastic assistants and interns that have gone to great things. And I think whether it's doing that for an artist or a composer or for a studio, it's the best way to educate yourself, to be in the room, to know what it's like to just sit back and be guided by someone else. I fully support that.
Yeah. I had at the Good Music Studio, we had interns, and overall, I would say maybe 80% of the interns were really great. We definitely had a bad 20% too. So the vetting process has to be good for interns, but I learned a lot. It's Good Music Studios. But overall, yeah, I think we've had some that went on and they're doing great right now, and they're doing great things and working with artists and got great gigs. So we feel like that was really we felt like we really contributed to that.
Yeah.
That was good. What are you currently working on?
Miriam Ben Amour is this artist I just mentioned. I
Yep.
just finished the record. Just came out like 1 week ago. So that's what I'm doing at the moment right now.
Okay, cool. All right. And then is there a time that you've been hired to produce a genre that you've had no experience in?
Sure. I think we all have. I think it goes back to putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation. Let's see. Yeah, one time I was hired to produce an artist that I co-produced with David Foster, and I was a little nervous because I was
working with David Foster.
working with David Foster, and
And he's a character.
he's a character, and I didn't feel worthy being next to him. So I was just like, okay, I'm here for a reason, but I don't know if, so that was a little awkward because, I like to put myself in an uncomfortable situation because we all can rise, to the occasion. But that was one time that I remember. It was for a film, and I felt a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. I've done the same. Well, honestly, truth be told, a director asked me, if I knew how to score a film, and I wanted the gig and I wanted to score a film. So I said, yeah, knowing I had no clue how to score a film. And then I did a jazz record too. That was a really great exploration into that, but it was really felt natural. So even though it was, my first time really working with a jazz band, it felt natural. It felt like I wasn't, even though it's not popular music or today's music, whatever the case may be, it felt like any other studio session when I'm working with a band or a live musician. So even though it was a different genre, it still felt.
But did you pass the test?
I did. I produced the record. It was great. Preservation Hall, the New Orleans Jazz Band.
But can I bring up a question that I think is important for people to know? And I keep going back to this of saying if you're not right. One time I got asked to score a film, and it was my first film, and it was down to 2 people, and it was a friend of mine. And I went to the music supervisor and I said, I think he's a better choice. I said, I really want this gig. I feel I'm the right choice. I can do a good job, but he just came off a really big independent film. Mm-hmm. And I said, and I was really honest, as much as it hurt. Well, he ended up getting fired from the gig, which is very common with composers. I got the gig and I did the film. And I remind myself of that as well, which you should, again, think about that when you're being asked to produce a record, which goes back to that question, because it sometimes can backfire. I mean, we've all been fired from projects. Another bit of kind of good advice is that I often say to artists, why don't we do a song or 2 before we commit? Because they not only do they like that, but it gives each party an out. And I say, let's do a song or 2. And if it works out, it's magic, we keep going. And if it doesn't, it's okay. There's no hard feelings.
So that goes right into someone's question. Do you prefer to produce an entire project with an artist or just a few tracks?
I prefer albums because you get a flow and you get a sound. Maybe because I'm old, I still like to listen to albums. I know most people don't, but another argument is that a lot of hit producers don't want that. They just cherry pick the 1 or 2 hit songs and they get out and let some other, chump do the rest of the record.
Yep, because they just want the singles.
Which is really not cool, but I understand that as well.
Yeah. What's your dream studio session? Any artist from any era?
Oh dear, an era.
Yeah.
I would say that's a good question. Okay, I'm going to twist the question because it's not as much of an era of musicians, but it's an era of technology. Because I'll give you an example. I did a Grammy panel with the late Phil Ramone.
Okay.
You know Phil Ramone.
Yep.
Produced everyone from Ella Fitzgerald to, Sting to Frank Sinatra. And somebody was commenting, and this was him talking, and they were like, oh, the sound of the voice or the sound of the drums. And his answer was, if we had better technology, we would have used it, but we didn't have it. So that's all we had. And there's something to be said about a record producer in today with so many options. When you ask me what era, some of the best records I've made is when I had absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I would like to go back to an era where maybe it was harder to get things done, but you had less choices.
Yeah.
Because there's great musicians now, as there were great musicians then.
And then what artist would you pick?
Prince.
I
mean, I did a remix for Prince. I was schooled by Wendy and Lisa and Susan Rogers. Yeah. That's my era, and all that whole camp. I feel like I'm in that. But if I could have been Susan Rogers, that's the era I would have been in.
So Prince was one of my answers too, and then Curtis Mayfield and Nina Simone, and maybe Maya Rudolph's mother, Minnie Riperton too.
Sure. Or like Sly Stone or Stevie Wonder. There's these kinds of records that they're not only were great songs, but great, musicianship and great sound, and just being a part of that is like nothing else. I mean,
I think with those, I would just want to sit in the room and watch. And same with Prince. I don't know that I'd necessarily want to produce Prince, but I'd want to sit in the room and watch him work. When do you decide a record is done?
I think that's the hardest part for anyone to answer, because even in today's climate, nobody wants to say it's done. So what are you doing? I'm working on a record. I'm finishing the mix, because it's never done and you can always work on it. But it's the worst feeling when you turn something in, because you can't fix it.
Yeah. Good point. It is one of the toughest things to decide. I just feel like it's kind of like a steak. You know what I mean? You gotta find that sweet spot when it's still tender and not overdone. You know what I mean?
And that's a good point. And this is going to parlay into a mastering engineering question, because a lot of people think whoever you choose to master your record, whether you're a producer or an engineer, don't assume that the mastering person has to do anything. A good mastering engineer will tell you it's fine. It doesn't really need anything, or it just needs such a little bit of this and that. That's a good mastering engineer. Don't just assume he's fixing or she is fixing it.
Well, I always feel like too, if you're going into the mastering session thinking you need a fix, then that's a problem right there for me already. Because you know what I mean? I just think that if you don't get that solved before you get there, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of people do that too. Like, oh, we just fixing and mastering. No, let's fix it now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
This is a good question. What do you feel about services like Masterclass or Mix with the Masters for learning new skills? What do you think about those type of things? Is it worth the money?
Mix with the Masters, I know of. The other one I don't read, but what little I know about Mix with the Masters is that it's more of the experience. Like, all those guys are friends of mine. I mean, who the fuck wouldn't want to go down to the south of France and eat great food and drink wine and listen to great stories? I don't know what they're learning, but I would think if I was paying for that, I would like to think that there's a diverse group of engineers or mixers in the room. I don't know enough about it. I think it's a great concept. I don't know. What's your thought?
I know about both. I'm a slut for learning. If you have the resources, it doesn't hurt. Masterclass leaves me a little short, meaning it gives you some lessons, it gives you some tutelage and some things to think about, but then it should continue. Now, because to me, now you learn some things, you apply it, then you have more questions, and there's nothing else there, But I'm all for learning. So, but I'll never trade real life experiences for like master classes and things of that nature.
Yeah, but I think those students don't have the opportunity, right?
Yeah, a lot of people don't. They don't have the access, right? So YouTube and master classes is where they get it. So, but I'm a slut for learning. So I think you should learn every lesson you can. So whether it's YouTube,
it's like people will steal music and software, but they'll pay for knowledge, which is fantastic because it's fun to learn something that you want to learn. So I've never attended those, but I'm certain they're valuable.
Gotcha. What albums have you heard and said to yourself, damn, I wish I was a part of that project? So many.
Like recently or in my life?
Period, I guess.
For me, it's not jealousy of, oh my God, this record's brilliant, I wish I had a part of it. It's more out of anger, like, that's so fucking easy. Why didn't I, I'll never forget, I was doing a record similar to a lot of the Beck records when in his heyday. And I remember thinking, I wish I was a part of those, because at that time it was so simple, but it was brilliantly simple.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I wish I was a part of those records, even though a lot of my friends were a part of those records, and they're great records, don't get me wrong. But I don't know. How about you?
You know, I've always been competitive, so it's kind of like a thing where, on one hand, maybe there is a little disappointment that I would say, I think the record. Usually, I'm a fan of a record, right? And I love the record, and I wish I was a part of it. But it's more of a competitive nature with me, meaning, okay, wow, they did an amazing job. Now I've got to go do work on something amazing. I've got to go do my best to make something amazing.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to fashion. I mean, we've all heard records that a specific sound or technique is fashionable, and then you're like, wait a minute, I don't know how to do that, or I do that but not as good as that person. Let me study it,
Yeah, and so it's always been a motivational factor for me to hear something great. Like, I hear something great from Frank Ocean, and I'm just, or whoever worked on it, I'm just like, oh man, that was amazing. And I've got some peers that I
Sure.
I think are really amazing producers that are friends of mine, and I love what they do. And because they're tweakers like me, they a little extra something special in the sauce. It's not just about trying to make a hit record with them. It's really about the devils in the details. And so those tend to be the people that I tend to be like, oh, you know what I mean, and more competitive with, and wish I was a part of, things they did. But but not envious. Definitely more of inspired by.
But there's some great albums out, and nobody really cares if it was done on your laptop or a big recording studio, or how many people were a part of it. There's some great sounding albums.
Like the British guy. What is it? Jai. What's the guy? Damn it.
Spike Sennett? I mean, the mixer?
Yeah, no, he's a producer, artist. Name escapes me, but it's almost like Bad Engineering on his records. But he's made Bad Engineering almost a style, a part of his production. And his name is escaping me right now, but
I mean, like James Blake?
Kind of like that. Blake's a good engineer though too. And he
but I'm saying, but he actually is a very good example of
Jai Paul,
purposely manipulating sound in a way that isn't audiophile.
Yeah. Jai Paul was the guy I was talking about, but Jai Paul, if you're familiar with that guy.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So to me, it's like, to each his own, right? Meaning, but it may not even be something I would normally do, but wow, someone really figured out something with that vibe. You know what I mean? Or how to.
I mean, when you hear a good record, and it'll stop you, and you're like, "Yo, this
exactly."
And I don't care what the genre is.
Yeah. Someone asked a question. Do you ever feel like you haven't spent enough time on a mix? I think we can all say yes on that. Well,
of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to the energy question, I wanted to go back now, because since we're sort of elder statesmen, right? If you were 20 years old now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Patience.
Patience.
I think for some producers, I find that it's one or the other. Like, for instance, some people are too analytical, and some people are the opposite. And I look back at if I was 20, I think I worked too quickly. Sometimes I listen back to records I've made and I think, wow, I did a really good job. But then I'll listen to myself and said, I could have done that better, when in fact, I think if I would have spent more time. But then there's also a charm of the excitement of doing something by accident that are happy accidents. I mean, maybe because I'm a Prince fan, but there's like, if I was your girlfriend, when Prince recorded that vocal, the power supply of the API console, half of it went down. So the vocal was recorded with distortion, but he had to sing, and he was singing it, and he sang it amazing. And that's the sound that people tried to recreate of this distorted sound on his voice. But it was because you had to go with it. And there's certain things about that are not being analytical, that you have to go with it. And sometimes when you create, technology can get in your way, but it can also work to your advantage.
Yeah, I think I try to create moments of happy accidents. That's
Sure.
definitely part of my exploration. Um, I was going to say, you brought up a good point that I like, patience, though. I think along the way, I had developed a skill set that allowed me to move fast, right? That's part of what I worked to have a certain skill set to be able to move fast. And I worked with a lot of artists when I was younger in my career, especially. I worked with a lot of artists that didn't have patience. So you had to move fast to keep them engaged. I agree with you. If the one thing I learned when I got to Dr. Dre, and I had already been producing shit for that point. By the time I got to Dre, I had already been producing for maybe 10 years. And what I learned about from Dre was him being a perfectionist, right? So it didn't matter how long it took him to get something right. He was going to take the time to do it. Now, we all, as a younger producer, we always don't have the luxury of that time. But I think you can split the difference, meaning you can take as much time as you have. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and that I agree with that, because I definitely that's the first thing that stood out to me when working with Dre. I was used to working, because we had to get it done. We had to, and then obviously working with someone who was like, no, let's slow it down. Let's figure this out. Let's get it right. And it was like, wait, what?
Yeah, because I think there's something to be said when you're young as a creator, you're fearless.
Yeah.
You're fearless. You don't have a lot of life's responsibilities. And there's something to be said about being fearless. I don't know. It's kind of a mantra of mine when you go into something, whether it's a relationship, business, or romance, or I don't know. And when you're making music and you're creating, you should be fearless as much as you can.
I agree. Sheck West, the rapper, he told me something that really resonated with me. I played him some tracks one day, and he said, "Jay, the tracks are too good." And he's like, "You sound like someone experienced. You sound like someone polished." He was like, and he played me a 16-year-old's track, and the 16-year-old's track, it had that honesty, right, of that inexperience. And there was a certain, like you said, there was a certain fearlessness to it. And part of what I've been doing, I'm glad you brought that point up, because now that I'm 50-year-old Che, that's what I'm throwing out the window. I'm throwing out all the rules and a lot of the lessons I learned, and I'm going back into pure exploration and disruption. And I want to be that guy. I got to be that guy. I got to be that guy who doesn't know the rules, who doesn't understand theory, who doesn't color within the lines. So I think that's a good thing, because to me, some of the best shit I've ever done was done in my first 10 years. Some of my biggest records were done in my first 10 years.
Yeah, and I think a lot has to do with technology. I mean, especially if you're a producer that relies on technology, whether it's an MPC or whether it's Ableton or Logic or Fruity Loops or something. But I remember when I had an MPC and a sound module and a little controller, keyboard, I was like, I'm good. Like I know how to do what I do blindfolded, and I'm cool. Now I got fucking more things in closets and storage. Yeah. I got more plugins, and I don't even know what I have. And yes, it's a good problem to have, but sometimes I kind of like working in hotel rooms or I'll sometimes put my laptop in my bedroom and do something because I know I don't have anything. But that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I do that now. I got this I call it the toy shop. I got this whole studio of toys. What I'll do is sometimes I'll just throw a bunch of shit. I'll play a bunch of keyboards, but then I'll just unplug the laptop, take it in the house, and work in the house with nothing.
Yeah.
On a controller in the laptop, and just edit and get away from all this shit, because you're right. All this shit sometimes can be too much, because when I started out, I didn't have all that. I'm the same way. I had,
Exactly.
you know,
had
I used to have to borrow people's gear because I didn't even have gear. I would go over their house, you know, borrow gear,
Yeah.
work on some shit, and take, you know,
And then you're done.
yeah, you know. So I do think there's definitely, and when you go to Jamaica, like, and you're working with producers in Jamaica or different countries, sometimes it's the same way. They may have one thing that they're really good on,
Exactly.
and that's what they make everything from.
Yeah.
There may be some what do you call it? A little bit of, you know, repetition and sound choices, but the creativity is just amazing, you know. There's a kid I work with from Brazil who's like that.
Okay. Cool.
Let's see if we got any last questions before we wrap up. We did our time. This was great, Carmen. I want to take any last questions. Thank you for you've shared some amazing insight, and I hope everyone takes some jewels away from this. I want to recap some of the things you brought up. One of the things you brought up is that youthful mind, that you brought up patience as a virtue. You've brought up, you know, navigate the energy in the studio, you know, but embrace the energy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think I love some of the references. Ray Charles, Seal, you know what I mean? Phil Ramone. They should know who they're fucking with. They should know. So I appreciate that. Let's see. Hold on. Someone's asking a couple of questions. Let me see if this was any word on the songs made for Kanye with love for everybody, William Reese. I can't speak on any of the Kanye songs if they're released. Kanye has a whole shit ton of songs that who knows if they'll ever release. He does go back and check his stuff. Maybe he takes the verse and puts it on something new or whoever, but you know, it's always moving forward, but you always got to look back sometimes to move forward. So he has a ton of music that's never gotten out. Any new of the Roman music got? Let's see. Any new, I don't know if I understand the question. I'm assuming, I think they're saying anything new that we've gotten into. Somebody asked, what was it like doing A Kiss from a Rose?
Oh, it was great. Now, you don't know, and this actually is a good question. Maybe you could parlay it to your other guests. You never know what you're working on. You know, A Kiss from a Rose was like track 7. It wasn't even a single. It was because of the Batman movie that it became so big, and it changed his life. It gave us all a career. And I think you just don't know what you're working on. I mean, I'm certain you've worked on huge hits as well, Shay, that you didn't know, because that's also hype. Like you're with some A&R person or some manager and they're like, this song's going to be a hit. Like, come on.
Oh yeah. A lot of people say that type of shit, right? So I never, yeah. I always feel like that's blowing smoke up somebody's.
Yeah. We're doing, like the person who asked Kiss from a Rose, it's like, we're doing a waltz in 6/8, you know? Did we really think that was going to be a hit? No, now it's a standard. It's like elevator.
I will say I've worked on records that I knew were going to be big. When we did, I had Lamborghini. So Lamborghini Mercy was a record we did that ended up being a crew record with Kanye, 2 Chainz, Big Sean, and Pusher. But I had found it from the original track I had gotten from this kid named Lifted in Arizona. As soon as I heard the original track, I knew I could make a big record out of it. So there are times where I've had good instincts and known that something was going to be.
But those are with artists that were already big, though.
Yeah.
See, that's different.
But you know what? But the artist didn't have the record yet. I had the record 7 months before I ever put any of the artists on it. And those artists were new, except for Kanye. At the time, 2 Chainz was a hot up-and-coming artist, and Big Sean was an up-and-coming artist. Pusha was established, and then Kanye was the big artist.
Yeah.
But you got to make something hot enough to want to make them want to be on it. You know what I mean? So Kanye wasn't on that record. I made the record as hot as I could make it because I wanted Kanye to have to be on the record. You know what I mean? So
sure.
You know, so there are times where I've known that I've had something special. I played Kanye Bound day one when we started when we started Yeezus. I knew it was something there. I knew it could be something. And then he said no because he felt like it was a layup. He was like, "Oh no, this is too good. This is too easy." And then by the time the end of the record, he asked me for the record back again. He said, what? He said, "Go." He said, "Where's that record that you had that you played me like week one?" So
that's great.
Somebody asked me what was the hot record for that record. I just knew it. I just heard it. The record was just a beat with a hook idea on it, and I knew the beat needed additional production. I knew we needed to add elements to the hook, but the potential was so there that I knew if I could get the combination of things right, I knew it could be a big record. Someone asked me if I work on Donda at all. Very little, but yes, very little. Any parting words for the pro chat community? Carmen?
Oh, for me? Oh, so from me. Sorry.
Yeah,
I thought you were asking them. No, I would just say, thank you for everybody who's been a part of this. I think, Shay, this is a great, platform to have different people with different perspectives from different genres of music, to sort of spread the gospel of just being a kind, classy producer. And, hopefully everyone out there should not be discouraged in the climate that we're in, because I think we all need music now. And that's something we didn't talk about, but maybe that's for the next time is feeling frustrated or depressed during the time that we're in. And I think now is the time to just, buckle down and just make really good music.
Yeah, that's a good point. These are tough times. So how people navigate it, that could be you're right. That could be a whole show, how people navigate it.
Because, there's just one last thought. There's two things, there's some people who are like, no, I'm not making music or putting music out. I'm going to wait until the world gets back. And then the other people are like, no, people need music. I have nothing but time.
Yeah.
Let's make music. So my opinion is go forward, make music. Don't stop,
Yeah. It's funny. I've been, I had to I think for pure inspiration, like I know people that have been making so much music, and I actually really had to take a break and kind of fill up the tank. So I am one of the people that was a victim of sort of COVID. I don't want to call it COVID depression because I wasn't necessarily depressed, but I wasn't making music. I had to step away from it. I was still I had my creative community with Temperature Check, and a lot of great young artists and producers were sharing with me. So they were giving me energy. And in the meantime, I was more or less studying, my gear. And I wanted to get dangerous again.
Because I think that's a good point too, is that, when you're getting hired to do something, you're into it. You're like, yeah, you roll your sleeves up in Europe. But when you're not getting paid to work or you have some downtime, it's not easy for any of us to be inspired or motivated to get in there. And whether it's learning new software or instruments or creating music, don't beat yourself up, man. It's hard for all of us.
Good. I missed a question earlier. I wanted to end on this question.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is the time, what point do you get to at a certain point in your career where it's like, okay, I can quit my day job and be a full-time producer? What do you feel like? I have my opinion on it, but I want to hear yours.
Oh, man. I struggle with this question because I'm in a situation now that I was before I had this job at Native. And everyone has a different lifestyle. And I'm reminding myself now how important one's lifestyle is. And it's not necessarily money, because money gives you option.
Yeah.
But lifestyle is health, is mind, is body, is whatever makes you a better person. So if you feel that you can be stress-free and quit your day job to be a full-time music maker, then you should go for it. But if you feel like you've balanced it well, where you're doing music at nights or weekends, that's okay too, because when you're stressed with no money, you're not going to be able to create. So
yeah. In my experiences, and I think we both have this in common. I had a family, so I had to make certain choices based on both. So I always I would say, even though I was making good money producing, definitely had enough money to sustain myself. But it's the roller coaster ride of the record business, right? Meaning
Sure.
some months you could make 50, 60 grand, and then the next month could be, dry as the desert.
$15.
Yeah, you might get a sound exchange check in for $44.
Yeah.
So, because I had a family, for me, I always kept some sort of gig. You know what I mean? It might have been music related, but I always made sure that I kept. Some
Yeah,
sort of-
and I think that's important way to end this is that you're never be ashamed of what you have to do for your life. If you have a family or you're married or a partner or something that you have a responsibility and you feel I need this part of my life carved out to do that, that's okay. Because if you're making great music or a great record, no one's going to give a shit if you work at the restaurant or wherever job you have. Nobody is going to care. And if they call you out for that, that's not cool.
Yeah, it's not cool, and that shouldn't matter. You know what I mean? I think goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the stress factor. I think if you can make a choice and be happy in your choice and whatever it is you're doing, whether you're holding down a job or whether you're not holding down a job, but you're still happy and you find some aspect of stability, then I think you've answered that question for yourself. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because I think no one wants to be stressed from living check to check or dollar to dollar. You know what I mean? That's not a great place to create from either. But I think if you can find a balance, you know what I mean, and you still get some stability from having a job and you still get some joy, obviously if you take off and you make a hit record and you make, $1 million, then you could look at it differently. But it's always good. Even when I've made $1 million, it was really good to still save the money, stay focused, you know what I mean? And it really helped me out for rainy times,
Absolutely. That's all very good advice.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Carmen, for being here.
Oh, man, thank you for having me. This is a great show.
Have you back anytime you want, man. We're going to do this every week.
With great pleasure.
It's a pro chat. The whole premise of this thing is that we talk about really specific and focused in conversation about it.
I have a question, and this is all for the listeners. Will these be archived for people to go back?
These will be on the Twitch channel. You can always go back on the workshop, which is Workshop 1 with no vowels. So the word workshop with no vowels 1. That's the channel. It'll always live there, and you can come back, check them out, so on and so forth. And it's great, man. I wanted to do this for producers because, for engineers, they got Pensado's place and they got a couple of different options. There's not really one that's just producers. There's producer battles and there's all these other things. They're not really a focused producer talk. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's a lot of gossip shows and like where, people get together and those are cool, they talk shit, drink champs and all that stuff. And you got Fat Joe's stuff and they talk about, all that. And what Joe Buttons does. But I wanted to do this just for the producers,
Yeah, that's a great platform. So anytime I'll be on it.
Cool. Thank you so much, man.
Okay, thanks so much. I'll see
you.
All
right, everybody. I'll see you guys. Anybody who wants to hang out with me, I'll be on the Discord channel talking my shit.
See ya.
See ya. Thank you.
She turned suicidal. When you see this business, it's all about survival of the fittest. If you don't go viral, you should quit it. I am the revival of the unfinished. You're my witness. Father, I wanna make you proud. Brothers and sisters, let me scream out loud. Distorted. I just pray I wake up in the morning. She ain't promised it all when we know this, but calling it quits is not in my calling. I don't need a penny to complete me, no. He should know. Let all of my elders and my teachers know. She is gold. Wonder has this always been my thesis? Oh, T would know.
What is this life that I lead? This is the life of a G. Can I enlighten you, please? I don't ever feel to be like what they're all trying to be. You don't even know I am the one you were dying to meet. What are you finding beneath? Lies dressed as honesty. Honesty, you should follow me down a rabbit hole. I go, I know. Change is scary, we call this life. So what? Move on. I'll always give you the realness, it's tough love. We ride to both heights we always dream of.
I remember you couldn't stop crying. You found me when I thought I was dying. Believe me when I say I tried so hard to change all the crazy shit I made you do, the long nights you held me through. Believe me when I say I could never be saved. Yeah, I tried to get it off my mind, to leave it all behind. Don't wanna make it worse, I'm gonna make it work. Yeah, I tried to get it off my mind, to leave it all behind. Don't wanna make it worse, I'm gonna make it work. I remember you stayed up all night to make sure I was alright. Believe me when I say I would have done the same. I hate the way my brain is wired. Can't trust my mind, it's such a liar.